This year we have been invited as a congregation to work toward several goals. This spring, we're addressing embracing transformation that is both centering and sustainable. Transformation can be a moment of ecstasy, of excitement, of transcending all of our own fears and boundaries, and then it's time to wake up the next morning and go back to work and make those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and get through the next day and the day after that. What can be for us sustainable and centering, and yet form across all previous barriers and boundaries a new way to be? I would suggest to you that as Unitarian Universalists, when we reach out across religious boundaries and have deep conversations with people of all faiths and what they would call no faith, but we know that there's faith in there. If only the faith to get up and keep on keeping on. We're good at ferreting out where people's faith really is, by whatever language folks would call it, and finding common ground, finding common heart, finding common cause and encouragement one of another. Finding people who can speak at a deeper level will help nourish us and one another. And it challenges us to be quite clear about what our faith is, to dig a little deeper within ourselves and not be appropriating other people's religious language or sensibilities in a way that is not as deep and authentic and well-researched and well thought out as we are possibly capable of. It challenges us when we are in interfaith dialogue to truly know where we stand as Unitarian Universalists. When Henry David Thoreau, in the 1840s, early environmentalist, began conversations with First Nations peoples. When Ralph Waldo Emerson brought in scholarship and began writing poetry about the Hindu perspective, they were criticized for watering down, for wandering away from their own Unitarian roots. But the transcendentalist vision of the 1840s, which broke open the Unitarian commitment to its historical roots of Christianity only, and invited in world religions, held sway. And in fact, we inherit their explorations today, so that we boldly go into the scriptures and the wisdom of all of the world's religions and philosophies, sciences, cosmologies. And then by 1896, when Unitarians were at the very center of the World Parliament of Religions, which was held in Chicago, that fear had been overcome, and people were able to articulate as Unitarians that welcoming in all these people from so many different lands and perspectives was a strength, and for people of all faith. And in fact, when the Unitarians and Universalists decided to merge in 1961, it was a coming together of different faiths. It was an interfaith dialogue for many decades before that, which resulted in finding such common cause that we became Unitarian Universalists. Peter Gaines suggests, despite all the facts otherwise, there is a difference between Unitarianism and Universalism, which will only deepen our own understanding of our faith. He says it's based on epistemology, the question of how do we know what we know. Unitarians primarily motivated by the search for truth. Universalists motivated by the reconciliation of love in the search for community. Love and truth. We've got two circles around our flame. Our Unitarian heart-centered tradition, our Universalist heart-centered tradition, our Unitarian intellectually centered tradition. As it turns out, we are of one piece, and those two things must work together, hand in hand, in each one of us individually, and also in the interfaith dialogues which we have. I have experienced being able to find common ground with people whose theology is completely foreign to my own Unitarian Universalist upbringing by centering on the heart and finding out what we in common deeply love. Or finding some fabulous idea that we can agree on and really get excited about exploring. Because we're good at this. We're good at finding common ground between people and standing there. I remember when I was in my former congregation up in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, which is largely settled by Finnish population. A scholar from the university there held a seminar at the yearly annual event which brought together the Finnish tradition, Haikenpava, and particularly focused on Nordic peoples. A group of people from the Sami indigenous nation came. They're around the Arctic Circle. They have reindeer, which feature prominently in the Haikenpava parade. Beautifully dressed in native costume, and they're not costume, they're native clothes. Their land knows no borders. So Sweden and Norway and other nations have artificial barriers, but the reindeer need all that land. And the care of the land which they need for their subsistence is incorporated geographically, not by nation. So the scholar came, and he had spent years with the Sami people and was invited as a great honor out with the elders to help trim the trees, which had buds that the reindeer could eat up to a certain point, and which took 10, 15 years to grow a single another branch or sprout because of the harsh climate. So he was invited out and invited to prune, handed a pair of pruning shears, and he knew how to do this. We can prune here in these United States, and he went to pruning and he decimated that tree. At which point the elder invited him to step back and look at his tree in relation to all the other trees, all the way to the horizon, which had been pruned in relation to one another, so that each was allowing space and light and nourishment, each for the other, with the exception of his, which was now pretty much reduced to a stub, and would take now probably 20 years to recover. We can challenge our own assumptions about how we know to do things when we widen our horizon, as that Sami elder invited the scholar to do, and look at our tree, look at our flourishing in relation to all others. And then we have a different point of view. What does transformation look like? It looks like opening ourselves up to a wider view while staying firmly rooted in our understanding of our tradition, so that what we do with one another, with all the helpers, theologically, politically, spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, all the helpers who are here when terrible things happen, can be welcomed in together, sharing one land, one horizon, one magnificent and beautiful earth. We will be transformed by these conversations, and we will find a way to stay centered and make those transformations sustainable into a future for which we yearn.